In 1985, a young girl and her mother vanished without a trace. For 28 years, silence reigned, until their car surfaced in a forgotten junkyard, unlocking chilling secrets buried beneath rust and time. What really happened that fateful day? This and many discoveries will be revealed as the story unfolds. It was a quiet Sunday in May. Birds sang, the sun was warm. In a small town outside San Francisco, Charles Bryant kissed his wife Maria and daughter Lydia goodbye. They were going shopping, just like they did every weekend. Lydia, only 8, giggled as she carried her favorite blue purse. Charles stood at the door with his mother Doris. He waved goodbye, expecting them to return within an hour. Maria had said she just needed to buy groceries and pick up a dress for Lydia's school play. It was supposed to be an ordinary day, but that was the last time anyone ever saw them. Hours passed. The sun dipped behind the hills. Still, Maria and Lydia didn't come back. At first, Charles wasn't worried. Maybe traffic was bad. Maybe the car broke down. He tried calling the store. No answer. He called friends. Nothing. Then worry turned into fear. Something was wrong. By nightfall, Charles called the police. Officers came, took notes, and promised to keep an eye out. But days passed. Then weeks. No sign of the car, no sign of Maria, no sign of Lydia. The red Mercedes had vanished without a trace. Their happy home quickly became filled with sorrow. Charles hardly spoke. He sat for hours in the living room, staring at the front door, hoping it would open. Doris tried to stay strong, but every time she looked at Lydia's empty bedroom, her heart broke. The toys were still there. The tiny shoes, untouched. The dress for the school play still hung in the closet with the tag on it. The police searched everywhere. Highways, back roads, even rivers. But nothing was found. Rumors spread. Maybe they ran away. Maybe something worse happened. But Charles never gave up. For 28 long years, he waited. He kept a photo of Maria and Lydia in his wallet, worn from being touched every day. People eventually stopped asking. Life moved on for everyone else. But not for Charles, not for Doris. For them, time froze on that warm spring day in 1985, the day Maria and Lydia disappeared. It was a cloudy morning when Charles got the call. He was in the kitchen, pouring himself a cup of coffee. The phone rang. He almost didn't answer. It was probably another scam call, he thought, but something told him to pick up. "Mr. Charles Bryant?" a deep voice asked. "Yes, speaking. This is Officer Elena Martinez with the San Francisco Police Department. We need you to come down to the city junkyard. We believe we've found something connected to your wife and daughter." Charles froze. My wife and daughter? You mean Maria and Lydia?" "Yes, sir. Please come right away and bring someone who can support you." His hands shook so badly the coffee spilled. He hadn't heard those names said by a police officer in years. After all this time, why now? He called his mother, Doris. She had always stood by him, even when others told him to move on. Together they drove in silence, the city growing closer with each passing mile. "What do you think they found?" Doris asked softly. "I don't know," Charles said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "But if it's them, I have to know." When they reached the junkyard, yellow tape surrounded the gates. Police cars were everywhere. Reporters stood outside the fence, holding cameras and notepads. Officer Martinez met them at the gate. "Mr. Bryant, Mrs. Bryant, please follow me," she said, her voice calm but serious. She led them through rows of broken-down cars and piles of rusted metal. The air smelled like oil and old steel. The ground crunched under their feet. Ahead, a group of officers stood in a circle. Something was in the middle, something hidden under a tarp. Martinez stopped and turned to Charles. "We received a tip," she said. "A man cleaning this junkyard found a red Mercedes-Benz buried behind a wall of scrap. We ran the plates. It matches the car your wife was driving the day she disappeared." Charles couldn't breathe. His heart pounded in his chest. "Are you ready to see it?" Martinez asked gently. Charles nodded. The officers pulled back the tarp. There it was, the red Mercedes. The same car Maria and Lydia drove 28 years ago. And it had been sitting here all this time. Charles stared at the car, His breath caught in his throat. It was barely a car anymore. The red Mercedes-Benz, once shiny, clean, and proudly parked in front of their home, was now a crushed metal shell. The roof was flattened, windows broken. The front of the car looked like it had been punched by a giant fist. Rust covered the sides like brown bruises, and weeds grew from underneath the frame. It had been squeezed by a junkyard compactor, twisted and crushed, ready to be fed to the shredder. One more day, maybe even one more hour, and it would have been gone forever. Lost. Charles stepped closer, unable to look away. The passenger door was jammed shut, its red paint peeling off in long curls. A faded sticker, one Lydia had stuck there herself, a smiling sun, still clung to the cracked glass. That sticker broke Charles. He fell to his knees. This was it. This is her car, he whispered. Doris knelt beside him, tears running down her cheeks. She put a hand on his shoulder, steadying him as Officer Martinez gave them space. How long has it been sitting here? Charles asked, his voice shaking. We're still looking into that, Martinez said quietly. The car was buried behind several layers of scrap metal. Someone didn't want it found. Charles turned to her, eyes burning. Someone hid it? Martinez gave a slow nod. That's what it looks like. The car didn't get here by accident. Someone made sure it stayed hidden. Charles looked back at the crushed Mercedes. The same car Maria had smiled in. The same one Lydia had sung songs in. Now it was just a broken, twisted memory. Why would anyone do this? Doris whispered. Martinez looked troubled. That's what we intend to find out. Then something caught Charles' eye. Something glinting inside what used to be the back seat. He pointed. Wait, what's that? One of the officers moved closer, using a flashlight to peek through the crushed door. It's a handbag, the officer said. Blue, small. Charles's heart dropped. Lydia's. Everything suddenly felt real. The car, the crushing, the blue handbag. Something terrible had happened here. And now, after 28 long years, the truth was clawing its way to the surface. The officer gently reached inside the crushed frame with a gloved hand. It took a few careful tries, but finally he pulled out the small blue handbag. It was dusty, dirty, and slightly torn, but still clearly a child's bag. There was a faded cartoon unicorn on the front, its colors washed away by time. Charles felt like the ground had vanished beneath his feet. That's Lydia's, he said quietly. She took it everywhere. She had a red bracelet inside and a locket. Officer Martinez took the bag carefully. We'll examine it at the lab. If it still has fingerprints or any DNA, we might get lucky. Charles nodded slowly, barely hearing her. His eyes were locked on the bag. It was more than an object. It was a piece of his daughter, frozen in time. How could this car sit here for so long? Doris asked, her voice small. Didn't anyone notice? Martinez looked around the junkyard, her eyes narrowing. That's what we're starting to wonder. The current junkyard manager, a man named Reed, says he doesn't know anything about it, but we're going to ask again. Charles stood up slowly, his knees weak. You're telling me this car, this crushed thing with my daughter's bag in it, was almost destroyed, just tossed away like it didn't matter? I'm sorry, Mr. Bryant, Martinez said. I know how hard this is, but I promise you, we will find out who did this. She turned to her officers. Secure the area. No more vehicles go in or out of here. And bring in Reed for questioning. I want to know how this car ended up in his yard and why he never reported it. As the officers moved quickly to follow her orders, Charles looked back at the car one last time. The sun had broken through the clouds now, shining on the twisted frame. It felt wrong. Too bright for a place that held so much darkness. For 28 years, this place had kept its secret, but now the truth was beginning to wake up. And Charles knew this was only the beginning. The officers led Charles and Doris away from the crushed Mercedes. Crime scene tape was stretched across the area now. Investigators moved around carefully, snapping photos, collecting anything that could be a clue. Charles stood near a rusted fence, still staring back at the wrecked car. It felt like a part of his heart had been trapped inside it for all these years. Then Officer Martinez returned. We've got the manager, she said. He's in his office. Says he wants to cooperate. Charles's fist tightened. He let that car sit there for 28 years. We don't know that yet, Martinez said carefully, but we're going to find out. She led them toward a small metal building with a flickering light over the door. Inside was a messy office. Papers everywhere, coffee cups on the desk, and a fan that buzzed noisily in the corner. Behind the desk sat a middle-aged man in greasy overalls. He had rough hands, a tired face, and a deep frown. His name tag said, R-E-E-D. You Reed? Martinez asked firmly. Yeah, he muttered. What's going on? My yard's full of cops. What's the problem? Martinez crossed her arms. We found a red Mercedes-Benz on your property. It was crushed and hidden under scrap. That car is linked to a missing persons case from 1985. A mother and daughter, Maria and Lydia Bryant, vanished in that car. Do you know anything about it? Reed blinked. 1985? That's almost 30 years ago. Lady, I wasn't even running this place back then. But you manage it now, Martinez said. Did you ever come across that car? Reed scratched his chin. Look, cars come in every day. Sometimes crushed, sometimes not. We process hundreds a month. I don't look at every single one. That one must have gotten buried years ago. Charles stepped forward. My wife and daughter were in that car. Their lives just disappeared. You're telling me you never noticed it? Reed looked at Charles, guilt flickering in his eyes. I didn't know. I swear. It was just metal to me. Martinez's eyes narrowed. What about this? She reached into her bag and pulled out something found in the office earlier that day. A blue handbag. Not the one from the car. This one was cleaner, less worn. Charles gasped. That looks just like Lydia's. Reed paled, and suddenly the room felt very cold. Silence filled the office. Charles stared at the second handbag Officer Martinez had placed on Reed's desk. It looked almost identical to the one pulled from the crushed car. Small, blue, and covered in little stars. But this one was cleaner, barely aged. That can't be a coincidence, Charles said, his voice sharp. Reed stood up suddenly, shaking his head. Wait. That's not what you think. I found that bag in the back closet a few years ago. I thought someone left it behind. Lost property. I didn't know it was important. Martinez raised an eyebrow. And you didn't think to report it? It's just a kid's bag, Reed barked. People drop stuff all the time. I kept it in case someone came looking. No one did. Charles's heart pounded. He didn't believe him. There was something in Reed's eyes, something nervous and slippery. Can we check what's inside? Doris asked, her voice gentle but firm. Martinez nodded. She opened the bag slowly, pulling out a red bracelet, a plastic toy horse, and a tiny silver locket. Charles stepped back. That's it. That's Lydia's locket. He had given it to her for her 8th birthday. Inside was a picture of her and Maria, both smiling under a tree. She never took it off, ever. How did this end up in your office? Martinez demanded. Reed wiped sweat from his forehead. I told you, I don't know. I didn't even open it. Martinez wasn't convinced. We're going to need you to come with us to the station. We'll need to search your full property and go over your employee records. Reed's face turned red. This is crazy. I didn't hurt anyone. Martinez stepped closer. Maybe not, but you're hiding something. This bag didn't end up here by magic. Officers entered the office and began bagging the items as evidence. Reed sat down, holding his head in his hands. Charles looked around the room. His heart was heavy, but a new feeling had started to rise. Determination. After all these years, the pieces were coming together, bit by bit, clue by clue. And now, for the first time in 28 years, the truth didn't feel so far away. By late afternoon, the junkyard was crawling with police officers and crime scene experts. Yellow tape surrounded the gates. Loud voices called back and forth as men in gloves searched behind piles of rusted metal and broken cars. Reed had been taken into custody, though he hadn't been charged yet. Officer Martinez wanted answers, and fast. Charles sat beside Doris on a bench near the fence. His hands trembled as he held Lydia's second blue handbag, now sealed in an evidence bag. I can't believe it was just sitting in his office, he said, his voice quiet. He knows more than he's saying, Doris replied. You saw his face. He was scared. Martinez joined them a moment later. We're going to search the rest of the property. Not just the yard, his storage rooms, the sheds, everything. Charles nodded. There could be more. The officers fanned out. Dogs were brought in. Cameras recorded every step. Then, just as the sun began to set, one officer called out, Over here, we found something. Everyone rushed to the far end of the junkyard, near an old storage shed that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. The metal door was rusted shut, but the officer had noticed something strange behind it, a piece of red fabric sticking out from beneath the frame. Martinez signaled her team. Open it, now! With crowbars and heavy tools, they forced the door open. A cloud of dust rushed out. Inside were old tires, tools, and broken furniture. But in the back corner, half buried under tarps, was something else. A suitcase. Martinez stepped forward. Careful. Don't touch anything until we document it. The officers snapped photos. Then slowly, they lifted the suitcase. It was locked, but the lock was old and broke easily. Inside were clothes, women's clothes covered in dust. A worn-out dress, a pair of shoes, and tucked into the corner, a folded note. Martinez unfolded it. Charles watched her eyes as she read. Her face changed, from confusion to surprise to something close to horror. What is it? He asked. Martinez didn't speak at first. Then she looked up. It's a note, she said slowly. Signed by Maria. Charles's heart stopped. His wife had left a message, and now the mystery was about to break wide open. The wind rustled through the junkyard as Officer Martinez carefully unfolded the old letter. The paper was yellowed with age, its edges curled and soft, like it had been hidden a long time. The ink had faded, but the words were still readable. She read the first few lines silently, then looked up at Charles. I think you should hear this. She cleared her throat and began to read aloud. If anyone finds this, please listen to me. My name is Maria Bryant. I don't know how much time I have. I am scared. I don't know who to trust. I was told we'd be safe, that someone would help us disappear. But now I know that was a lie. Charles felt like he couldn't breathe. The world tilted. That was Maria's handwriting. Her voice echoed in his mind as Martinez continued. Lydia is with me. She's scared too. We were supposed to meet someone here. They told me to come to this place, the junkyard. I thought it was strange, but they promised to help. I think it's a trap. Martinez paused. Her hands trembled. Charles gripped the bench beneath him. Keep going, he whispered. If I don't make it out of here, please find my daughter. Please tell Charles I tried. I didn't run away. I loved him. I only wanted to keep Lydia safe. The letter ended with a single word. Forgive me. Doris covered her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Charles sat frozen, tears silently falling down his face. She hadn't left them. She hadn't vanished on purpose. She had walked straight into a trap. Why? Charles asked softly. Who did this? Who was she meeting? Martinez folded the letter with care. We'll test the paper for fingerprints, and we'll start digging into everyone connected to this junkyard, past and present. Charles stood up, his legs shaky. We need to find out who lured her here, and what they did to her, and Lydia. He looked out across the junkyard, its shadows growing longer in the evening light. If Lydia is still out there, she deserves to be found. Martinez nodded. One thing's clear now. This wasn't just a missing persons case. She looked down at the letter in her hands. This was a setup. Back at the station, Reed sat in an interview room under a buzzing light. He hadn't said much since being brought in, but the discovery of Maria's letter had changed everything. Officer Martinez entered with a folder in her hand. She didn't sit down. Instead, she placed the letter on the table between them. Recognize this? She asked. Reed looked down at it. His jaw tightened. No. It was found in your storage shed, with clothes that belonged to Maria Bryant, the woman who disappeared in 1985. Reed shrugged. So what? This yard's been around a long time. I didn't even work here until 1996. Martinez leaned in. That's not true. We pulled your records. You were a part-time worker here in '85. You went by a different last name, Thomas Reedman. Changed it legally in 1992. Reed froze. Martinez didn't stop. We also found photos from a box in your office. Some of the cars that came in, some people. One picture caught our attention. It's you, standing next to a red Mercedes-Benz. Reed's face turned pale. You knew that car was here, Martinez said, and you knew who it belonged to. I didn't. Don't lie to me, she snapped. You hid that car. You kept the girl's bag. You kept the suitcase. Why? Reed's hands trembled. I didn't kill anyone. No one said anything about killing, Martinez said softly, unless that's what happened. Reed sat in silence, sweat dripping from his forehead. Back at the junkyard, Charles and Doris watched as officers scanned the ground with radar equipment, looking for signs of disturbed earth. Martinez had ordered the full yard to be searched, every inch. I don't know what they're going to find, Charles said, his voice low. But I'm afraid. Doris nodded. Whatever happened here, it wasn't just a disappearance. Then an officer came running. We found something. Charles followed them past the crushed cars, past the old shed, toward a corner of the junkyard surrounded by weeds and rusted barrels. There, half buried in the dirt, was a shoe, a child's shoe, blue and tiny. Charles fell to his knees. It was Lydia's. The officers stepped back as Charles stared at the tiny blue shoe lying in the dirt. It was worn and dusty, but he knew it. Lydia had begged for those sparkly shoes when she was 8. He had saved up for weeks just to buy them. This was hers, he said, voice trembling. She wore them the day she disappeared. Officer Martinez knelt beside the spot. Don't touch it, she said softly. Let the team work. She called in the forensic experts who began digging carefully around the area. Every handful of dirt brought more tension. The ground gave off a strange smell, old oil, rust, and something else. Charles stood back with Doris, holding her hand tightly. What are they going to find, she whispered. Charles didn't answer. He didn't want to say it out loud. Not yet. Within minutes, something else appeared in the dirt. A piece of fabric, pink, then another small shoe, then bones. Stop, one officer called. We've got human remains. Charles felt his knees buckle. Doris held him upright. Officer Martinez turned to them, her face grim. We can't say who it is yet. We'll need DNA to confirm. But from the size, it's likely a child. Charles closed his eyes. No. Martinez placed a hand on his shoulder. We're going to treat this with care. If it's Lydia, we'll make sure she gets the respect she deserves. Charles stepped back, his heart breaking all over again. She was just a little girl, he whispered. She didn't deserve this. The forensic team worked into the evening. They marked the area with flags and took samples. The bones were carefully removed, wrapped, and taken away for testing. Meanwhile, back at the station, Reed sat in silence. But the pressure was mounting. Martinez returned, dropping a photo of the shoe on the table in front of him. We found this, where you used to work. Near the spot Maria said she was tricked into coming. Reed's eyes flicked to the photo. He didn't speak. Tell the truth now, Martinez said, before we find more. Reed swallowed hard. For a second, his face cracked. I didn't mean for it to happen, he muttered. I didn't mean to hurt her. Martinez leaned forward. Then tell us everything. The room was dead silent, except for the low hum of the overhead lights. Reed sat hunched at the table, his fingers knotted together, eyes locked on the photo of Lydia's shoe. Martinez didn't speak. She let the silence press in like a weight. Finally, Reed let out a breath, long and shaky. It wasn't supposed to be like that, he said. Martinez's voice was calm but firm. Tell me what happened. Reed stared at the wall, his voice slow and low. Back then, in '85, I was young, working part-time here at the yard, just trying to make money. Then one day, this man Frank came around. He drove a black pickup, said he had a job for me, easy money. What kind of job? Martinez asked. Reed rubbed his eyes. He wanted me to arrange a place to meet someone, a woman, said he was helping her run away from her husband, said she was in trouble. Charles flinched behind the one-way glass. He was listening to the confession from the other side of the room, his face pale. She wasn't running away, he whispered. She was coming to meet someone she thought would help her. Reed continued. I didn't think much of it. Frank gave me cash and told me to keep my mouth shut. I unlocked the yard that night and left. Said he'd handle the rest. What happened next? Martinez asked. Reed shook his head. Next morning, I come in and find the red Mercedes parked in the back. Empty, no one around. I looked in the car and saw blood. Not a lot, just a little, but enough to scare me. Martinez's eyes narrowed. So what did you do? I panicked, Reed said. I buried the car under junk, hid it behind other vehicles. I didn't tell anyone. And then the years passed. I bought the place in the 90s, changed my name, thought it was over. And the suitcase? Martinez asked. The little girl's bag? Reed's voice cracked. I found it weeks later, in the office closet. I couldn't throw it out. I didn't know why. Guilt, maybe. Martinez stared at him. Do you know what happened to the girl? Reed looked at her. No, he whispered. But I think Frank does. And if he's still alive, he knows everything. Frank who? Martinez demanded. Reed shook his head slowly. I don't know his full name. He never gave it. Just Frank. Martinez leaned closer. You expect me to believe that? You helped a stranger trap a woman and her child, and you didn't even know his last name? I didn't know what he was going to do, Reed snapped, but his voice cracked. He said it was just a drop-off, that he was helping them start over. Martinez straightened. Describe him. Everything you can remember. Reed nodded slowly. Tall, maybe 6 foot, short dark hair, always wore sunglasses, even indoors. Talked fast, had a scar under his left eye, drove an old black pickup with a dented side. That's all I've got. Martinez took notes quickly. You'd better hope we can track him down, because right now, you're the only one we can hold responsible. She left the room and stepped out into the hallway, where Charles and Doris were waiting. Did he name him? Charles asked. First name only, Frank. No last name yet, Martinez said. But I believe him about one thing. Frank was the one pulling the strings. If this man is still alive, he may be the key to everything. Back at the junkyard, officers combed through old files and photos found in the storage room. Boxes of records, receipts, and faded Polaroids were stacked on tables. And in one box, an officer found something, an old staff photo from 1985. Martinez examined it later that evening. She pointed to one man in the back row. Who's that? Reed looked at the photo and hesitated. That's him. That's Frank. The photo was grainy, but the scar was there, just beneath the left eye. Martinez scanned the back of the photo. There was a scribbled name, Frank G. That's enough to start with, she said. She called her team. Run this photo through facial recognition. Search old employee records, criminal files, DMV logs, anything. I want every Frank G who worked near this yard in 1985. Charles stared at the photo, his eyes narrowing. That's the man who took my family. Martinez nodded grimly. Then we find him. Because the truth had been buried long enough. The search for Frank had begun in earnest. Officers worked late into the night, combing through records, following every trail. Facial recognition technology scanned old photos, while detectives called former employees and neighbors. In the cold light of the police station, Charles sat with Martinez and Doris, staring at the grainy photo of Frank. Do we have any leads? Charles asked, voice tight. Martinez shook her head. Not yet, but the more we dig, the more names pop up. Frank G is common enough, but the scar helps narrow it. Suddenly, Martinez's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and frowned. That was one of the neighbors near the junkyard in 1985. They remember a black pickup truck, dent on the side, just like Reed described. Charles leaned forward. Did they see where it went? Martinez hesitated. They said it left the area suddenly, weeks before Maria and Lydia disappeared. The room grew quiet. The timing was too close to be a coincidence. Just then, the door burst open. An officer hurried in, pale-faced. We found something at Frank's last known address, he said, breathless. An abandoned house, empty for years. But inside, we found evidence. old clothes, a small child's toy, and a journal. Martinez's eyes sharpened. A journal? This could be the breakthrough we need. Charles's heart pounded. Could this be the proof that would finally bring his family's truth into the light? Outside the station, shadows lengthened. Somewhere out there, Frank was watching, waiting, and the deeper they dug, the closer danger crept. The abandoned house smelled of dust and decay. The floorboards creaked beneath the officers' boots as they stepped carefully inside. Years of neglect had left the place filled with broken furniture, spider webs, and the faint smell of something forgotten. Martinez held up the journal she found on a dusty table. The leather cover was cracked, and the pages were yellowed but filled with neat handwriting. Charles looked over her shoulder. "Whose journal is that?" "Looks like Frank's," Martinez said. "We found his name written inside several times." Doris shivered. "What does it say?" Martinez flipped open the first page. The words were chilling. "They think I'm gone, but I'm still here, watching, waiting. The girl and her mother thought they could escape. They never stood a chance." Charles felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. As Martinez read on, the journal detailed Frank's obsession with Maria and Lydia. It spoke of plans, lies, and threats. The entries grew darker, filled with frustration and rage. One passage stopped Martinez cold. "Tonight, I made sure the red car was hidden well. No one will find them. If anyone comes looking, they'll have to deal with me." Charles clenched his fists. "That car, the Mercedes." "Yes," Martinez said. "This journal confirms it wasn't just a random disappearance. It was planned." Doris wiped tears from her eyes. "Why? Why would someone do this?" Martinez closed the journal. "Because they wanted control, power, and they didn't care who got hurt." Outside, the wind howled through broken windows, as if the house itself whispered dark secrets. The past was finally catching up, and with every page turned, the truth grew heavier. The next morning, Charles woke early. The weight of the journal's words pressed on his mind like a heavy stone. Every detail painted a clearer picture of what had happened to Maria and Lydia, but also brought more questions. He looked at Doris. "We need to face this. We can't keep waiting for the police to find Frank. I have to know the truth." Doris nodded, her eyes full of tears but also strength. "I'm with you. Whatever comes, we face it together." At the station, Martinez was ready. "Charles, we have a lead on Frank's possible location. An old cabin on the edge of town. It's been abandoned for years, but someone's been seen there recently." Charles swallowed hard. "Can I come with you?" Martinez looked surprised but nodded. "It's dangerous, but you deserve answers." They drove in silence toward the cabin. The trees grew thicker and the road narrowed until it ended. At a small, weathered building surrounded by overgrown bushes, Martinez and officers approached carefully. The door creaked open with a shove. Inside, the cabin was empty, but showed signs someone had been living there recently. Blankets, canned food, a worn chair. On the wall, taped to a wooden beam, was a faded photo of Maria and Lydia, marked with a big red X. Charles's heart broke all over again. "Why?" he whispered. Martinez picked up a torn piece of paper nearby, a scribbled message. "Stay away or else." The threat was clear. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves as if warning them to turn back, but Charles clenched his fists. "No more running, no more hiding. We're going to end this," Martinez said firmly. The past was no longer buried. It was alive, waiting. After the cabin visit, tension filled the air like a thick fog. Charles couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching them, tracking their every move. Back at the station, Martinez reviewed the latest evidence, but her phone buzzed suddenly. A text message appeared on the screen. "Stop digging or you'll regret it." Her eyes narrowed. "Someone wants us to back off." Charles paced the room, fists clenched. "They won't scare me. Not after everything." That night, Charles drove home, his mind racing. Shadows seemed to stretch from every corner, and every sound made him jump. Suddenly, headlights flashed behind him. A car followed closely, tailing him down empty streets. His heart pounded. He sped up, but the car kept pace. Turning sharply, Charles lost the tail for a moment, but the message was clear. Frank, or someone working for him, was warning them to stop. The next day, Martinez gathered the team. We need to protect Charles and Doris. And Frank is dangerous and desperate. Charles refused to be a victim. We're not hiding, and he said, we're finishing this. Martinez agreed but warned, we're dealing with a man who's been hiding in the shadows for decades. He knows this town inside out. As the sun set, the town grew quiet. But beneath the silence, something dark was moving. And the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous the path became. The days that followed were tense. Police kept watch over Charles and Doris, while detectives worked nonstop to find Frank. Leads came and went, but nothing concrete. Then late one evening, Martinez received a call from a local post office clerk. There's a package for you, the clerk said, voice nervous. No return address, just a note. Martinez opened the package carefully in her office. Inside was an old faded photograph of Maria and Lydia. Folded beneath it was a small piece of paper, covered in smudged handwriting. Martinez read aloud, if you want to find the truth, look beneath where the red car sleeps. Charles and Doris exchanged a glance. The junkyard, Charles said. The officers quickly returned to the site, retracing their steps through the maze of crushed cars and rusting metal. Martinez knelt by the spot where the red Mercedes had been found. The ground was disturbed, as if something had been buried or dug up. With the team's help, she ordered a careful excavation. Hours passed before they uncovered an old rusty metal box buried beneath the dirt. Inside were more clues, old documents, a diary, and a locket with a faded picture of Maria and Lydia. Charles held the locket, tears streaming down his face. This is proof, he whispered. They were here. They were real. But the message came with a warning. Someone wanted them to find the truth, but only if they dared. The dusty diary found in the metal box was old and fragile, its corners torn and pages yellowed with time. Still, the writing inside was clear enough to read. Martinez carefully opened it, her fingers brushing over the name written inside the cover. Maria Bryant. Inside the quiet police station, under the dim light of a desk lamp, Martinez began reading the diary aloud to Charles and Doris. Each word filled the room with heavy silence. Maria had written about the weeks before she disappeared. Her words were full of fear. She wrote about a man named Frank, someone she knew but no longer trusted. He had been following her, watching her every move. She believed he wanted to hurt her, though she never said exactly why. I feel like I can't breathe anymore, one page read. He shows up at the grocery store, outside Lydia's school, even near our home. I told Charles, but I didn't want to scare him too much. I just want to take Lydia and leave before something bad happens. She also wrote about the red Mercedes and how she had packed a small bag, the blue handbag, for emergencies. It was clear she was planning to run, but something had gone terribly wrong before she could escape. As Martinez read, Charles lowered his head into his hands. Doris silently wept. This explains so much, Charles whispered. She was scared, and I didn't see it. Martinez gently closed the diary. We're closer now, but this story isn't over. Soon after, officers at the junkyard called in another discovery. Fresh footprints had been found near the place where the metal box had been buried. The prints led away from the site and into the trees behind the junkyard. Martinez stared at the evidence. Frank, or someone, is still nearby. Someone who didn't want that diary found. Just then, a call came in from one of the officers stationed at the abandoned cabin. The cabin had been broken into during the night. The place had been ransacked. Drawers left open, papers scattered. Some evidence was gone. Charles's chest tightened. He's watching us, he said, his voice shaking. Martinez nodded, her face pale but determined. And he's getting bolder. The past was no longer buried. It was walking among them, and it was getting closer. The discovery of Maria's diary had shaken Charles and Doris deeply. Every word was a glimpse into the fear Maria had lived with during those final days. The hope she clung to, the danger she faced, it all became painfully real. But as the police worked to piece together the past, the present danger grew closer. Martinez studied the footprints near the buried box carefully. They were fresh, distinct, and led away from the junkyard toward the outskirts of town. It was clear Frank, or someone connected to him, was still lurking nearby. We're not just investigating history anymore, Martinez said grimly to her team. We're dealing with someone who's watching us. That night, Charles sat at home, restless and unable to sleep. His mind raced with memories of Maria and Lydia, his wife and daughter, and the nightmare that had haunted his family for nearly 3 decades. A sudden noise outside made him freeze. Heart pounding, he peeked out the window. Shadows moved near the driveway. Someone was there. He grabbed his phone and quietly called Martinez. "Stay inside, don't confront them," she instructed calmly. But Charles couldn't sit still. The anger and desperation in him burned fierce. He wanted answers, justice, but most of all, he wanted to protect what remained of his family. The next morning, Martinez and her team launched a search in the nearby woods where the footprints led. The thick trees swallowed sound, and the air was heavy with tension. Hours passed without a trace, until one officer found a discarded glove snagged on a branch, stained and torn. "This is a sign," Martinez said. "They're close." Suddenly, movement in the bushes startled everyone. A figure darted through the trees, a man tall, wearing sunglasses just like Reed had described Frank decades ago. The chase was on. Through the twisting forest paths, officers pursued the shadowy figure, their breaths heavy in the cold air. Charles followed behind, every step filled with a mix of fear and determination. As the man disappeared into the undergrowth, Martinez shouted, "We're not letting him slip away again." The hunter was becoming the hunted, and this time, Charles vowed, the truth would finally come to light. The forest was quiet except for the heavy breathing of the officers chasing the man known only as Frank. Charles's heart pounded. After all these years, the man who had taken his wife and daughter was close. Too close. The figure stumbled, slowed, and finally stopped. Martinez and the team surrounded him. The man took off his sunglasses, revealing tired, haunted eyes. Eyes that had seen too much darkness. "Frank," Martinez said firmly, "it's over. Tell us what happened to Maria and Lydia." He looked down, then nodded slowly. "They never wanted to disappear," Frank whispered. "Maria was trying to protect Lydia, but I made a terrible mistake." Frank's confession was chilling. He revealed that Maria and Lydia had tried to run away, but he caught them. In a panic, he hid the car in the junkyard and kept the secret for years, afraid of what would happen if anyone found out. "I didn't mean for them to die," he said, voice breaking. "It was an accident, but I covered it up. I was scared." Charles felt a rush of pain and relief. The truth was finally out, but it did not erase the years of silence and sorrow. Martinez took Frank into custody, and the investigation continued to uncover the full story. For Charles and Doris, the past was still painful. But now they had answers. The red Mercedes-Benz was more than a forgotten car in a junkyard. It was a symbol of a lost family and a mystery finally solved. As the sun rose over San Francisco, Charles looked at the horizon. "This is the end of the long wait," he said quietly, "for Maria, for Lydia, for us all." The town could finally begin to heal.